In this video, I'm super excited because we're going to be talking about the future of forms in React, and this video is very special because we have a special guest, Aurora Scharff. I will let her introduce herself in just a moment, but essentially what we're going to be doing in this video is we're going to be talking and kind of doing a mini interview, I guess, if you will, but we're also going to be looking at code and specifically comparing the old ways of doing forms that you probably know and are familiar with to the new and modern way of doing forms, which is going to be super cool. I'm super excited. I really enjoyed making this video, and I hope that it's going to be very educational for you. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Welcome everyone. We have a very special guest today and a very special video. I'm super excited. I'm here today with Aurora Scharff, and we are going to be talking about forms in React and specifically forms on the server, which is very exciting. It's very new and it's the direction that React is going in. And I, as well as you, we're kind of here to learn from Aurora's expertise because she has expertise in the field. And we're going to look at some examples of forms, some actual code, because I know that you guys love code. We're going to look at code, talk about it, nerd out a little bit, and then just have some fun. So how does that sound, Aurora?
That sounds great. Thank you for having me here.
Perfect. Thank you for being here. So first, because my audience doesn't know who you are, would you please give us just a very short introduction on who you are, what you do, and get the audience familiar with you?
Yeah, okay. So my name is Aurora. I'm a web developer from Norway, and I work in Meta, which is not Meta. It's just a consultancy here in Oslo. And I work with Next.js app router and server components in my day-to-day project here. So that's kind of where I get my inspiration and my examples from a lot of the time. And then I do this conference speaking on the side. Pretty much that's it. And try to bring what I'm learning into my talks and share that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So I like that you mentioned the conference. So that's kind of the main reason why we're here. So we're also here to promote the conference. It is the React Berlin 2024 conference, and Aurora is one of the speakers. And I've been given the opportunity by the conference themselves, by Git Nation, to actually conduct this interview in a way to promote the conference. So Aurora, what is your talk going to be at the conference?
So my talk is called Enhancing Forms with React Server Components, and it's trying to, in a practical example, showcase all of these new features and what they enable us to do. And also blend in a bit like general server component patterns as well, where relevant.
Perfect. Great.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the reason we're going to talk about forms and server components and all of that today. I have here on my screen, Aurora, you're not seeing this, but I just have like the landing page of React Day Berlin just to kind of show all the speakers. There's really cool speakers attending the conference. I will also be there personally. So that's the first time that I do something like this. So to everyone watching, if you want to meet me personally, hang out, nerd out about React, check out the conference and come pay us a visit, and also come check out Aurora's talk. Cool. So in the spirit of the talk, I want to actually look at some code, right? And we have here some examples of forms in React. Now we're going to try to kind of compare the old way, or I guess the classic way of doing things, of forms and compared to the new way of doing things, which is more server-centric, right? And using all the new and latest and greatest hooks from React to kind of achieve, I guess, in a way, the best of both worlds. So what I have here currently in front of us is a component called sign-in form 1. So this is the old or the classic way of doing things, right? So I'm just going to quickly go over the code. It's nothing really fancy. We're using React hook form. We're using Zot, and it's a pure client-side component. So as you can see here at the top, we're using use client. We're inside of a Next.js project. So this is a client component. We have here our typical use form where you have some data and a schema. Here it's just a simple email and password, and then we're getting the form state, we're getting the handle submit and the register function. We have a function to handle submit. So on submit, we're just going to call a sign-in one function that is a server action. So we're actually having a little bit of server here, even though we're still completely on the client, which you can do. You can use server actions in React hook form. That's a question that a lot of people have been asking me, and you can do that. And then we have the typical form markup. And the only thing that is really interesting here, or at least pertinent to this conversation, is the fact that we're using the onSubmit handler, which we're passing the handle submit, and we're wrapping that, and we're passing our own onSubmit function, and that is on the onSubmit, which is a client-side event handler. So this needs the client side to work, right? And then everything else is pretty standard. There's nothing really fancy there. So Aurora, let's first start. What are your just general thoughts on this pattern and way of doing forms? What do you think about it?
Yeah, so first of all, that was a great explanation by you. You really summarized everything there. That was really good.
Thank you.
Well, as you're saying, it's a very typical way to handle a form, except we're now using server functions, which is, different from when you were using the pages router when you had to make API endpoints. So that's something that's different here from the typical way. But other than that, it's a pretty standard way to handle a validated form. And it's great because you handle the errors instantly. You get this nice interactive feedback as you're typing, letting you know that you do have validation errors and such. Yeah, totally fine.
So yeah, that kind of brings me to my next question, which is like, what are the positives about this? Because you did mention you get immediate feedback, right? I feel that that's very important. Like as a user, you're using an application, right?
Yeah.
The benefit of using React Hook Form is it does all of that for you behind the scenes. You don't have to worry about that at all. And you get all of these through like the form state. You get all of these errors. You get pending states like this is submitting flag, right? So what else would you say? Like, is that it? Like why would someone use this, right? Like this way of doing things in terms of what is good about it, right? Is it just the immediate feedback or is there more?
Well, definitely. I mean, that's why you go for something like this. You want this very responsive form that can respond to your blur, your change. And it's very flexible because you can decide what type of validation you want from this use form hook. You can fill in the mode, if it's going to be on change or on blur, what kind of validation it's going to do. Yeah, it's a great library if you need validation and you just want to use something that's already been made.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
And then I guess moving on to the other side, are there any drawbacks to using this approach? Because it seems great, right? And also for context, this is also for my own thing. So I'm mainly a React Native developer. That's what I do. I work on my clients with clients and client projects and stuff like that. It's all React Native. So this is what I use like day to day, and there's nothing wrong with this. And I would recommend this even to this day, right? But we don't have yet server components and all that functionality in the React Native world. So I'm kind of stuck with this, but I don't mind being stuck with this. But I guess it might be a bit different in the world of the web, where this might not be the best approach anymore. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah. Well, you were kind of revealing it earlier, but this is a client-side thing, right? We're using client-side JavaScript to show this validation to the user and also to submit the form. And this means that if before you actually hydrated this form, you're going to get the default form behavior, right? Which means that if you don't have the JS yet, it's going to be a very uncomfortable user experience. So that's kind of the bad side of this, where you're relying on the JS to be there to get this nice experience. And actually, if you don't have the hydration completed here, you will get the default form behavior. It will push the URL, it will refresh your form, and then you will lose all your input. So that's definitely the bad side of this when you're on the web, that you can get uncomfortable user experiences if you're dealing with maybe something, a device that's not loaded the JS in time.
Fair enough. So for anyone that isn't familiar with this, essentially before the hydration, that's before the JavaScript has gone to the client. So the client, which means the user that's actually using your application on their browser, be it the mobile phone, the actual computer or whatnot, they get the raw HTML that makes up your page, your markup and whatnot, but no JavaScript yet, right? And so if they submit the form in that time before the JavaScript, maybe their internet connection is slow or whatever, then all this on submit stuff, which is all your functionality of the form, actually isn't there because you don't have the JavaScript for it. And so you're going to revert back to the default form, which is to go and to make a post request to whatever action you've set there. And since you haven't defined anything, it's just going to make an empty post request and reload your page, which is not a good user experience. Now, my question to you, Aurora, and also for me, because I'm not like, obviously I work on the web and stuff like that, but it's not the main thing that I focus on. How realistic is this problem? Like, does this actually happen to like enough users for it to kind of warrant thinking about it as an actual problem?
Well, so this is a very big question you're asking here, because a lot of users are never going to have this problem. And I think it depends very much on what type of app you're building. If you're building some kind of software as a service where they're always sitting on a computer, you know, you can expect that the user have a powerful enough computer to have the JS loaded before they start interacting and trying to submit forms and such. But there are a lot of cases where you have some kind of app that actually you want to have this form right away as the first thing you see on the page. And it could be accessible from a phone. It could be on a device that is not able to process the JS as quickly, and then have the JS in time. So I think it really depends on your app and who you're trying to build for. But of course, if you can do this kind of progressive enhancement where you have something that works and then you make it better, then of course you should. If it's not too much work, it's a great way to think that you're trying to build something that will also work for lower end devices or whatever is your use case.
So is the problem with the JS not getting there in time, is it more like a network problem, or is it actually a processor problem, like processing the JavaScript?
I think for processing, for running the JS, that would be a processor thing. But for downloading it, that would be a network thing. So you could have both or either problems be present.
Interesting. Okay. So then, since you're saying it depends on kind of the project, does that mean that it's still okay to kind of do forms this way, right? Like, I mean, this is still a step up, right? Because now we're using React Hook Form. We're not just straight up having our own state variables and managing all of that, right? We're kind of like a step up. So is this still okay to use even like in some production applications?
Yeah, I would say I actually have a blog post about this because people think that you don't want to use this anymore. Well, yeah, you totally can still use this. It's completely fine to use React Hook Form if that's what your app needs, right? So yeah, definitely. There's no problem with using React Hook Form still in this way.
But could you couldn't, like you still need to use the onSubmit, right? With React Hook Form.
I mean, in theory, you could also add an action as well,
right,
like, as a fallback. But I don't know if that, I mean, there's probably better options than that. Rather than trying to hack this React Hook Form into being more than what it is.
Fair. Yeah. So then if you're kind of mainly on the client and you're okay with being on the client and your users don't necessarily need or you expect your users to have a lot of JavaScript and you still want to stand on client, this is fine to use. Or in my case, right, with React Native, this is all we got right now. So like, of course, it's the recommended way to do it. Perfect. Okay, good. So I feel that we kind of understand this. So now I want to move on to the new and modern way of doing things, the server way of doing things, which is now in this beautifully named component, sign-in form 2. So over here, once again, I'll just quickly go over. There's not that much different. The only different pieces is, first of all, we're not using React Hook Form anymore. We're still on a client component, so we still have use client because we still want client-side interactivity, but now everything is driven through this useActionState hook. This is a hook from React. Aurora, correct me, is this a new hook in React 19 or has it been around before?
Yes, React 19, that's correct.
React 19. And there was useFormState before, which has now become useActionState. That was just the next
thing. That's a rename, and they also changed where it's coming from. I think React, if I'm not wrong here, useFormState came from React DOM, whereas useActionState comes from React.
Right.
There was some reasoning about this. I forgot what that changed, but that's what I remember.
Fair. Okay. So this useActionState is a new hook from React, and it gives you a couple of things. So it first gives you a state over here, and I'm going to show you where this state is coming from and how this is actually getting populated. This is the state that is going to get changed as the action that you're calling in the form is doing things, right? Whatever it's returning, success, errors, that is going to go into this state. And that is then what you use, as you can see here a little bit below, like to show errors to the user. You use state.error, and then if you have a state and .error, you then would show the actual error. So it's very similar to our first example, but this is now coming directly from the useActionState hook, which is great because now you don't need, you need one less library to actually achieve pretty much the same thing. But this now has more benefits. So one of the first benefit is, as you can see here on line 13, the actual form, we're passing the form action as the action property on the form. And this is the second argument that we get back from useActionState. That is the actual function that we pass to the action of the form, and that's going to handle kind of processing the form through the action property, which would work even without JavaScript. That is the important part. This does not need JavaScript to work, but it can have JavaScript to work, right? But it doesn't require it. And now, we also have this is pending over here, which we can use to have the same loading behavior on the button, or even just disable the button to prevent the form from being submitted while it's being submitted. And that again comes default from useActionState, which is pretty cool. Now, let's go here because you see we're passing here a function to useActionState, which is the sign in to. So let's now go and look at our actions.ts file and let's look at sign in to. So this is a function. This is a server action. You can see here at the top of the file, we're using the useServer directive, which essentially means that every single thing that is exported in this file has to be a asynchronous server function and will ultimately get converted to an endpoint that we can post to. Yeah. So we have here the signature and the arguments of the sign in to function takes in the previous state, which is just the previous state that we can optionally, I mean, it's not optional, it just automatically gets passed because we're using useActionState. So that is the state property that we have here in the component. That is the one that is here. And then you can use that if you want to do anything in this function. In our case, we're not doing anything with it. We're not returning it or anything, so we can just ignore it. And then you get the actual form data from the form. So this is different from React hook form that actually would give you an object with a key value pair of like all of your form values. This is the actual form data object, which is kind of reverting back to the, I guess, rep primitive APIs, right? You're working directly with the form data. And then we're just doing some very simple Zod validation here. And then if we have not a successful validation, we just return an object with an error. Otherwise, we just return success. And again, that is going to go directly inside of the state property over here and then work with our form. So Aurora, again, general thoughts on this form and new way of doing things.
Yeah, so this is a very it's very different way to handle forms, and it kind of takes us back to this old way of working with forms that somebody like me who joined React in the spa world of React, you know, I never knew this stuff. Actually, probably I'm not the only one who didn't work a lot with like native HTML. So for me, that was very exciting to learn this other way of working with forms using the action property. And it's really cool because we're now directly calling this endpoint on the server and we're getting the validation, and it actually doesn't need JS to run. It's just an endpoint, which is really cool.
So let's now take the case, as we were talking about before, somebody has maybe a not so powerful device or not such a strong internet connection. So there is no JavaScript yet, right? So we're still before the hydration. What happens if the user is able to enter their username and password and press submit? What happens then?
Well, it's going to work because it's just calling this server function generated endpoint, right? So everything is pretty much the same, except you're not going to get the pending feedback.
You're not going to get the pending feedback, but you are going to get the state, right?
Yep, you will get the return value from the server. So you will get this message saying that if you're submitting something that's invalid, you will get that state back and you can see it, or the form will submit if it was valid.
But that will happen after a page reload, right?
Without JS, yes.
Yeah, without JS, yes. So we're still without JS in that still scenario.
Okay, yep.
Right. Yep. So that's the beauty of this, right? Is you use one hook and this works in two environments, with JavaScript and without JavaScript. And it kind of works slightly differently, but it achieves the same result. So how we were saying that the state variable over here, if, for example, our validation is not successful, right? Our password is, for example, too short or whatever, which a user can enter. We're going to return back in the actions file, we're going to return back this object with an error that says invalid form data and that's successive false. If we don't have JavaScript, we're still going to get that in the state over here, but it's going to be after a page refresh, and we're just going to get it. It's not going to be actual JavaScript state. It's just going to be hard-coded into the HTML. Now, if we do have JavaScript, then we're just going to get it through the hook, through a state update and a re-render. So we're getting like the real best of both worlds using just one API, if you will, one hook, right? So this, I mean, at the surface kind of seems great because we killed React hook form. We got all of this functionality, even if JavaScript is not there. And then we're still getting the client-side input and everything that we love on the client side when JavaScript is there. So this seems like the best of everything. So are there any drawbacks to using this approach? Anything that we should be wary about or careful about?
Yeah, so I mean, the way it's right now, definitely, because we don't have this per field validation, right? Which is something we're getting in the React form example. But that can very easily be solved because we can just, which is a nice pattern, you can just return the errors, you can return the values, and you can put them as the errors and the default values of the form. And then you're kind of back to this nicely validated form that as you click submit, you will see what errors per field you have. So this is a common way to work with useActionState, is actually returning the errors and the data submitted, so that you can see it in the same way you could with reactive form.
Right, because if you don't return the data, so actually that's important. When you submit the form and there's an error, your data in the form is lost, right? If you don't return it from the useActionState.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
And that would come from the state property here in the useActionState. So that's very important. So for everyone that might have missed it, the state property over here from useActionState is not just about errors. It's about the entire state of the form and everything that you want, which includes data. So what is going to happen here is if you just have it actually the way we have it now, when you submit the form, if there's an error, you're going to get the error returned, but the form is going to be completely gone. All your data, so all your username and password that you've entered are going to be completely gone. The only way to fix that is, as Aurora said, is to actually return the values from useActionState and then use that as the default value of the actual inputs, right? Then you get the both worlds. And is that something that you're going to kind of talk about at your talk in the conference?
Yes, I will be showcasing this pattern.
Perfect.
I will not showcase the exact way you can do it with adding the error under each field, but that's the same pattern that you can also do, which is great because now you have this really nice form that you get your errors, you get the values are maintained, all of that is all good, except you don't have this this as you type validation, right? But everything else is, I would say, way better because it's way more robust, right? It will work as you're waiting for this hydration to happen.
You're right. I didn't think about that. You don't get validation as you type.
Yep.
Interesting.
Correct.
So
yeah,
so would that be like, how would we solve that to get validation?
In theory, what you can do is you can just add an on-change handler and then do some form of calling the server action, blah, blah, blah. You would display the errors, but useActionState and this pattern with errors and default values is already quite a bit of code. It's not that much, but it's a little bit more to code, right? And then you would have to do this on change call as well. But I was actually doing some research like just before this, because I know there's this library called Conform, which is doing all this for you. And it's amazing because you can actually get this reactive form feedback while having everything called to the server and be working or be progressive enhanced. So that's kind of the solution to that if you want the best of both worlds.
Very interesting.
I have a demo on this that I just made, and I'm thinking of making a blog post as well because it's a very interesting case. Yeah,
it sounds like it. Yeah, I'm looking at Conform right now. I didn't know about this library before that. I will look at it more because the example that they're showing here is actually really, really great.
It's awesome. So the way it works is it actually, well, it works for multiple frameworks, but I think it's built for Remix, but it also works for Next.js. So you will actually use useActionState because you're utilizing this way of calling the server and getting the state back. But then you have a hook that you will hook up to the validation, and then it will also take in the last result of useActionState, which is your return value from the server. And then you will just spread, sort of like reactive form, just spread the props on each field and on the form. And it's beautiful. It's going to work just like that. It's really great. Wow.
I will definitely try this. And I think I might even make a video on this. This sounds really, really great. Cool.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks for the tip. That's really great. Cool. And then I guess last question that's a bit more general. This is also for my own understanding because I've been kind of observing from a distance, if you will, all the server stuff that's going on in React. And I know that, you know, there's been a decent amount of pushback and kind of people in the community not necessarily agreeing on everything, right? Which is always the case. You can't really avoid that. But do you have any like insights or even opinions on why like React as a whole is kind of moving generally more towards the server? I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, whenever we invent, I think this is a very broad question, but whenever you fix something, right? You fix this problem that we have by making client-side apps. Okay, now we have lots of JS. Okay, now we're moving over to server-side rendering, but now we have these hydration problems. And you always have some kind of problem that you're fixing, right?
Right.
And right now we're trying to fix the hydration problem, or like waiting a long time for her to hydrate these pages, and then you're doing a lot of work unnecessarily because you could just be putting things on the server and then not hydrate them at all, which is the problem we're solving right now. So it's a lot of frameworks are doing this, trying to find a new way to make faster apps. That's always the goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's natural that React also follows that direction and tries to solve it in its own way.
Fair enough. That makes sense. It's just sometimes you kind of it's easy to get lost or to feel like you're being left behind, or that you have to always like catch up and be on top of things, right? Especially for me, because I make videos about this and that's like my main thing. Like I have to be like, you know, caught up about that. And it's kind of different because I work in React Native for like my career and my clients and stuff like that. And then I still have to on the side, like, okay, what's new in the server? What's this? And even before we had like, I'm going to oust myself a bit, but like I messed up an export, and the code that I sent to Aurora had like an error straight up in it. That's because I haven't worked so much with server actions. Basically, I exported a type here in this actions.ts file, but you can't export. You can only export asynchronous functions from something that is use server. Right. Yeah. I just doesn't come naturally to me yet. and then sometimes, you know, I can understand people that also say like, oh, we should go back to like HTMX or like jQuery or stuff like that, because it's like, I don't know, it feels a bit simpler, but like you get a lot of benefits with React, and it's just the nature of it, right? Like you're saying, you're always gonna have problems to solve. It's exciting to solve problems, and we're kind of all, I guess, on the journey to better, faster, and more performance.
Another note on this, just the fact that Remix has kind of been trying to do this for a long time. That's kind of, I mean, they've been focusing on progressive enhancement and web standards ever since they released, right? Mm-hmm. And there hasn't been a good way to do the same in Next.js, which is, you know, it's been missing. So typically this with the API endpoints, right? It was very complicated to submit forms because you have to make API endpoints, whereas all the other frameworks already have a way to have form actions. Yeah. So it was really about time for there to be something as well for Next.js, and it's just great that React itself is making them, because then all of the other frameworks can follow it as well, right? So we all have the same ways to do these types of things to the server. Right. It's all of these React 19 hooks and the new stuff. It's like it's an effect, or it's a result of the direction towards the server, and now we have a way to kind of communicate between the server and the client smoothly, right? So it's really great that React is making this stuff, and it's totally optional. You don't have to use any of it, but if you want to, you can.
I mean, for now, right? I think at some point it would become the standard, and just everything would be a hybrid server client, and it would just automatically behind the scenes handle everything, and you would write less and less code. It would be hidden behind abstractions, right?
Yeah, well, you never know. We're still here.
Yeah, we're still here. That just kind of feels like the direction. But no, good point, because I know my audience, and they're like, you know, some of them are like afraid and stuff like that. Like, right now it's fine. Like you don't need to jump on this bandwagon necessarily. I would still recommend that you learn about it and you get familiar with it, because it's always good to know. But like, take it from me, if I'm not actively working in all of this server stuff, right? I have a valid excuse. I'm in React Native, but like, it's okay. You know, take your time. I think what's more important for my audience is like, learn how to be a good developer first, right? And then learn how to optimize everything. I mean, I guess it's kind of part of it, right? But focus on yourself, gaining confidence, feeling confident in yourself and your own abilities. And then you can much better, much more easily tackle all of these latest and greatest things with the correct mindset, right? Because that's ultimately really important.
I completely agree. Yep.
Perfect. So that's really it. That's all the questions I had. Thank you so much, Aurora, for being part of this. I really enjoyed this. This was really educational, and I hope that you enjoyed it as well, and that the audience enjoyed it as well. Do you have any closing comments? Anything you'd like to say?
I guess maybe just looping back to what we started, you can still use your React form, do what you're used to, just keep learning. I guess that's the conclusion here.
Keep learning and know what it is you're doing. Know what limitations and what benefits you're getting out of it. And if you're fine with that, if your project is okay with that, if your team, whatever, by all means, it's totally fine. Yeah. And if anybody shames you for it, just ignore them and don't worry. You're right. You got it from us. You're right. Cool. So then that's it. Thank you so much, Aurora. And thank you everyone for watching. Hope that you've enjoyed this. And once again, you'll be able to find both of us at the React Day Berlin 2024 conference. It is going to be on December 13th in person and 16th online, but you can also be remote for both dates is fine. But the day that you can meet both of us in person, which you should, is going to be December 13th. That is a Friday, I believe. So get your tickets now. There will be a link in the description. I have a special discount code that you can use. Come see me, Aurora, come see all of the other great speakers. It's going to be a great time. And we're going to hang out in Berlin. I love Berlin. I live in Europe, so like I'm familiar with Berlin. Berlin is a wild city. It's like one of the wildest I know. So it's definitely worth seeing, even like just if you haven't seen it before, I definitely recommend at least once. So yeah, thank you so much everyone, and I will catch you all in another video.